Welcome to the Paper Trails and Rabbit Holes podcast. Welcome to The Debate.
Glad to be here.
Today we are unpacking a really fiery central question from the source material. We're looking at two famous debt repayment frameworks, the debt snowball and the debt avalanche. And the big question is algorithms versus animal instincts.
Right.
Basically, is personal finance actually a math problem?
Which, obviously, I argue it is.
Well, I firmly disagree. I'm taking the side of what I call the gospel of behavior. I believe getting out of debt is, an 80% behavior problem. It's only a 20% math problem. Human beings are meaning-seeking creatures, not spreadsheets, and we need emotional fuel to succeed.
And I'm taking the opposing view. I am the mathematical rebel today.
Fair enough.
I look at debt strictly as a financial engineering problem. It is an algorithm. It requires cold, hard logic. The singular goal should be lowering the total price tag of your debt as fast as humanly possible, rather than, catering to our feelings.
Right, so let me lay out my foundation here. The central premise of the behavioral approach is that we human beings are not machines.
No, we aren't machines, but
We don't wake up in the morning motivated by fractions of a percent, right? According to the material, the path out of debt relies heavily on this thing psychologists called the goal gradient effect.
the rat maze thing?
Exactly. The classic maze experiments with rats. When the rats physically saw the cheese at the very end of the maze, they actually ran exponentially faster.
Because the finish line was visible.
Right, they sprinted. And that psychological reality is exactly why the debt snowball method works. You list all your debts from the smallest balance to the largest,
Ignoring the interest rates entirely.
completely ignoring them. You just pay the minimums on everything else, and you attack that tiny little debt with every spare dollar you have.
Getting the quick win.
Getting the quick win. Those wins create a literal snowball of dopamine in your brain, and that chemical reward gives you the stamina for what is, honestly, a multi-year journey.
I understand the appeal of that, I really do, but I come at it from a completely different angle. To me, debt is an inverse asset.
An inverse asset?
Yeah. Think about it like this. When you invest money, compound interest works for you, right? It slowly builds wealth.
Right, sure.
But when you are in consumer debt, compound interest is an inverse asset. It's working aggressively against you. It's like a weed in your financial garden, just choking everything out.
Okay, I see the analogy.
Because of that mechanism, prioritizing small balances over high interest rates is mathematically broken. The debt avalanche method is the only logical path. You list your debts from the highest interest rate to the lowest, period.
Which makes sense on paper, but
It makes sense in reality. You attack the highest interest rate first because that is the specific account costing you the most money every single day. The snowball method essentially forces people to pay a sentimentality tax to the banking industry.
a sentimentality tax.
Yes, you are actively choosing to lose thousands of dollars in wasted interests simply to buy a fleeting feeling of accomplishment.
Well, that tax is exactly where we need to clash. Because let's actually look at the source material simulation to see what that means in practice.
Let's do it.
We have this hypothetical person with a $50,000 liability portfolio.
And let's break those exact numbers down because they perfectly illustrate my point. This person has a $15,000 credit card at a massive 26.99% interest rate.
Basically 27%.
Right. But they also have a $5,000 medical bill sitting at 0% interest. And let's say they have about $1,500 of extra cash every month to throw at the debt.
Right. And the snowball method says, attack that $5,000 medical bill first. It's the smallest balance. Knock it out, get the win.
Which, mathematically speaking, is completely absurd.
How so?
Let's really look at the mechanics of a 27% interest rate. That $15,000 credit card is generating roughly $330 a month just in interest charges.
That is a lot. Yeah.
It is a literal daily tax on your future. If you target a 0% medical bill which isn't growing at all while letting that massive credit card just sit there accruing interest, the data shows exactly what happens.
You end up paying more.
You pay a snowball tax of over $3,300 in wasted interest. Not only that, it adds 2 whole months to the repayment timeline.
Right, but
Let me just finish this thought. If you're dealing with a 26% card right now, ask yourself, why should you pay a bank a $3,300 fee just for a psychological pat on the back?
because it works?
It's like having a gaping chest wound and a tiny paper cut and choosing to put a Band-Aid on the paper cut first just because it makes you feel proactive. That $3,000 could be an emergency fund. It could be your retirement.
The chest wound analogy is vivid, I'll give you that. But here's my pushback. You were treating this person like a computer that flawlessly executes code. They are a fallible human being.
I'm treating them like an adult who can do basic math.
But listen to this. Imagine I give you the mathematically perfect diet. It is optimized down to the exact calorie, right? But it tastes like cardboard and you have to eat raw kale 6 times a day.
Okay.
How long are you realistically going to stay on that diet?
If my financial survival depended on it, I'd stay on it until the job was done.
But the reality is most people won't. They will quit on day 3 and go buy a cheeseburger. The avalanche method routinely fails in the real world because people go years without seeing a single account actually close.
But the total price tag of the debt is going down.
They don't feel that. In your simulation, if they attack that massive $15,000 card first, they're going to be grinding away for over half a year before they get to cross anything off their list.
Sure.
They're still getting the same exact number of bills in the mail every month. That leads to massive behavioral burnout. To me, that $3,300 tax isn't wasted money.
Then what is it?
It is a very cheap behavioral insurance policy. It guarantees you actually finish the plan.
That is a compelling argument, I admit. But have you considered what you are actually insuring?
What do you mean?
You are insuring their own lack of discipline. You're paying a massive premium to avoid doing the hard, logical thing.
It is not a lack of discipline, though. That is a fundamental misunderstanding of why people quit. You are fighting neurobiology, not laziness.
Neurobiology.
Yes, the source material dives deep into the human brain here. When people are in deep debt, they are in a state of chronic, suffocating stress. But the act of spending money actually steps on the gas in the brain's reward center.
The striatum.
Exactly, the striatum. Because spending is neurologically addictive, getting out of debt requires hacking that exact same chemical system. We have to replace the dopamine rush of buying new things with the dopamine rush of killing debts.
I get the chemistry of it, but
When you wipe out that $5,000 medical bill, your brain gets a massive dopamine spike. You feel like a winner. You physically need those small wins to trigger enough dopamine to keep fighting the bigger battles.
okay. But the science also shows that dopamine hits can violently backfire.
Really?
Yes, the material points directly to academic studies, specifically the work by Gall and McShane. They detail a phenomenon called the licensing effect.
Wait, how does paying off a debt suddenly turn into a disadvantage? You're saying a psychological win backfires on people?
Absolutely, because of moral licensing. The licensing effect is what happens when you give yourself a gold star way too early.
Uh-huh.
These small wins you are championing are genuinely dangerous. Imagine paying off a tiny $500 balance. You get that dopamine hit, sure.
Right, you feel good.
But it often makes people feel morally entitled to reward themselves. They look at the closed account and think, wow, I just paid off a debt. I am doing so great. I deserve to go out to a nice $100 dinner to celebrate.
Well, I mean,
It triggers a complacency that ruins the entire mathematical plan. You took 2 steps forward and then 3 steps back because the dopamine tricked your brain into thinking the war was over.
when you had only won a tiny battle.
Exactly, a tiny, insignificant battle.
That's a really interesting point, though. I would frame that behavioral response entirely differently. The dopamine isn't a trick, it is momentum.
Momentum based on what, though?
Think back to those goal gradient experiments. When people see a zero balance on an account, the data shows they don't generally get complacent. They actually start finding extra money to throw at their debt.
In some cases, sure.
They sell their unused guitars. They, take on extra weekend shifts. The momentum overrides the complacency.
But real sustainable motivation shouldn't come from a sugar rush of dopamine. It should come from reality. It should come from tracking the drop in the total price tag of your debt.
But that's just numbers on a screen to most people.
If you are tracking the data, watching your monthly interest charges drop from $400 a month down to $200 a month, That is a massively powerful motivator. It is based on the actual retention of your wealth.
But your argument assumes everyone knows how to read an amortization spreadsheet, and more importantly, that they enjoy doing it.
It's not about enjoying it, it's about survival.
If you're listening right now and you're juggling 10 different minimum payments, you probably aren't running spreadsheets on a Friday night. And this leads us directly into the cultural clash at the center of this material.
The mainstream gurus.
Yes, the mainstream coaching narrative. The reason the feel-good behavioral narrative is pushed so hard is simply because it works for the vast majority of the population.
And that is exactly where I take the biggest issue. This whole philosophy treats adults like children who are fundamentally incapable of doing basic math.
I think that is a pretty harsh way to characterize it.
It might be harsh, but it's the truth hidden in the paper trail. The mainstream myth essentially says, oh, you couldn't possibly understand how compound interest is destroying your future, so just line up your debts from smallest to largest, like stacking wooden blocks.
It's just simplifying the process.
I argue it fosters a low literacy trap. It actively keeps people blind to the realities of how money actually works. True financial literacy means understanding that a 24% interest rate is actively extracting your wealth.
Sure, but
You have to attack it like a disease. By catering to emotional weaknesses, these gurus are just enriching the banks by making people pay that snowball tax. If we just taught people the math, they wouldn't need the coddling.
I completely disagree with the idea that it treats adults like children. It treats adults like human beings who are completely exhausted.
Exhausted from bad math.
Let's look at the 80-20 rule cited in the research. Financial success is 80% behavior and only 20% head knowledge. If it were just a math problem, nobody would ever get into credit card debt in the first place.
Well, obviously.
The math is obvious, right? Don't spend more than you make. But people get into debt because of life crises, emotional spending, and overwhelming circumstances.
I agree that emotions cause the debt. Absolutely. But the cause of the disease shouldn't dictate the cure.
What do you mean by that?
If a bridge collapses because of bad weather, you don't use weather to fix it. You use structural engineering.
But you weren't fixing a steel bridge. You were fixing a person's ingrained habits. The mainstream approach relies on something called gazelle intensity.
Which is just a buzzword.
It's not just a buzzword. Do you know what gazelle intensity actually looks like in practice?
It means selling the car you love. It means pausing your retirement. It means delivering pizzas at 10 p.m. on a Friday night just to scrape together an extra $100.
You cannot spreadsheet your way into that level of radical lifestyle sacrifice. You need pure emotional fire. Destigmatizing the psychological struggle is far more effective than coldly lecturing stressed-out people about interest rates.
I'm not lecturing. I'm showing them how to keep their own money.
If someone is juggling 10 different bills every month, the mental load is crushing. Clearing out 3 or 4 small accounts quickly simplifies their life so they can actually breathe.
But you are assuming they have to juggle those 10 bills forever under this crushing mental weight. If they actually understood the math, they wouldn't treat debt as an emotional burden to manage.
They treat it as what, then?
They treat it as a literal threat to their survival.
Ah. You are talking about the FIRE movement now, aren't you?
Exactly. Financial independence, retire early. The FIRE movement introduces the emergency mindset, which completely rejects the need for emotional coddling.
They are pretty intense.
They look at debt as a flaming emergency inside your house. The logic is brilliantly simple. Every single dollar you pay in interest is literally a day later you are allowed to retire.
It's a day of your freedom stolen by a bank.
Exactly. When you view debt as an active existential threat to your survival in your future time, you don't need a dopamine treat to stay motivated.
You don't need a gold star.
Right, you don't need a pat on the head or a closed account to feel good. You just put the fire out as fast as mathematically possible, which inherently means using the avalanche method to stop the bleeding.
I absolutely see the power of the FIRE mindset. It is incredibly focused and mathematically bulletproof.
Yes, it is.
But I have to push back on its reality for everyday people. I compare the FIRE mindset to holding your breath underwater.
How so?
Highly disciplined people, like data engineers or extreme optimizers, They can train themselves to hold their breath underwater for a very long time.
Because they know they have to.
They can endure the pain of not seeing a closed account for 2 years because they are staring at the total price tag of their debt dropping. They have the lung capacity for it. But the average person?
The average person can learn.
The average person will drown. For someone making $50,000 a year, with kids, juggling those 10 bills, the chronic stress of just trying to make it to Friday is the real emergency, not their retirement timeline 30 years from now.
But the math.
Clearing out the small accounts is the only way they can get their head above water to take a breath.
But the math explicitly proves that the water is deeper if you use the snowball. If debt is a fire, the interest rate is the gasoline.
Okay.
Why would you pour water on the smallest flame, a 0% medical bill, while the biggest flame in the kitchen is being doused in 26% gasoline?
Because you have to start somewhere you can win.
The FIRE community understands that optimizing every single dollar is the only way to buy back your time. Sacrificing your own timeline and giving the bank $3,000 just to have fewer envelopes in your mailbox every month, it's a catastrophic misallocation of your own life's resources.
It is only a misallocation if you assume the person is a robot who will perfectly execute the plan for 3 straight years without ever getting tired, getting sad, or losing their motivation.
It's called discipline.
And the academic studies in our source material, like the one from the Kellogg School of Management, show that people who use the snowball method are vastly more likely to actually reach zero debt. The sheer number of accounts closed is the single biggest predictor of long-term success.
I will concede that the empirical studies do show higher completion rates for the snowball method among the general population.
See?
But I still argue that is a failure of our education system, not an inherent flaw in the math itself.
That's a bold claim.
If we taught people to find their psychological win in the total interest saved rather than the number of accounts closed, we could have both the motivation and the mathematical efficiency. We wouldn't have to choose between logic and feelings.
Perhaps. But right now we have to deal with human nature exactly as it is, not as we wish it to be.
Fair enough.
If we step back and look at this entire discussion, my stance remains clear. The best financial plan is the one that human beings will actually finish. Because we are emotional, meaning-seeking creatures. The behavioral approach, the snowball method, remains the true winner for the masses. It provides the psychological fuel necessary to survive the journey.
And I will hold firm that logic and math are the only true ways to build wealth and avoid being exploited by the banking system. The avalanche method respects your hard-earned money and your future time. It requires intense discipline, yes, but mastering that discipline is the exact skill you need to build long-term wealth once the debt is finally gone.
Well, despite our clash over data versus feelings, there is one area where the source material shows total convergence between both camps.
Absolutely. Whether you are driven by the dopamine hits of the snowball or the hard data of the avalanche, the only guaranteed way to fail is by making minimum payments.
Exactly right.
Minimum payments are mathematically designed to keep you in debt forever.
Exactly. You have to put surplus capital into the system, no matter which target you aim at first. There is so much more to uncover in the behavioral science of money and how our brains interact with our wallets. The paper trail doesn't have to end here, but the descent is just beginning. Find us at PaperTrails&RabbitHoles on YouTube, Spotify, or wherever you hunt for the truth. Keep your eyes open. We'll see you at the bottom.